The most honest moment of my life didn't happen under lights or applause. It happened off stage, in a quiet space where no one was watching, no cameras were waiting, and no one needed me to be strong. There was no microphone in my hand, no music to guide my emotions, no audience to reward me for holding it all together. Just truth. People think honesty is loud. They imagine it as confession, as drama, as a moment designed to be remembered. But the truth is usually quieter than that. It shows up when you're exhausted from pretending. When you finally stop performing for the world and sit with the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. That moment came to me unexpectedly. Not after a standing ovation. Not after a breakdown on stage. But in the stillness that follows, when the adrenaline fades and you're left with nothing but yourself. For years, I believed my most real moments were the ones I sang. I thought if I poured enough emotion into the music, there would be nothing left to hide. But what I didn't understand was that singing can sometimes be another kind of mask. A beautiful one, but a mask all the same. Off stage, there was no song to save me. This story isn't about a performance the world remembers. It's about the moment no one saw. The moment that changed how I understood myself, my voice, and the cost of always being admired but rarely known. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't facing the crowd. It's facing yourself when no one is clapping. Stay with this story until the end to discover what happened in the silence, and why that offstage moment became the most honest one of my life. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. The night it began, the hallway behind the stage smelled like old carpet and fresh adrenaline. I had just walked off after an encore in Los Angeles, the kind of night artists dream about. The crowd wouldn't stop cheering. People were crying, hugging strangers, screaming my name like it was a prayer. From the outside it looked like another victory. Another reminder that my voice still held power. But the moment the curtain closed behind me, something inside went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Hollow quiet. I kept walking, heels clicking against the floor, smiling automatically as crew members congratulated me. Incredible tonight, Whitney. That last note gave me chills. You saved the night. Save. That word followed me like a shadow. I nodded, thanked them, touched shoulders, played the role. I was good at that. I had been good at that since I was young, knowing exactly when to smile, when to reassure, when to disappear into grace. My dressing room door closed behind me with a soft click. Silence. I leaned against the door for a moment, not moving, listening to the muffled echo of applause still leaking through the walls. My chest rose and fell faster than it should have. Sweat cooled on my skin. My hands trembled just slightly. I told myself it was normal. Post-show adrenaline. Fatigue. Nothing more. But when I walked to the mirror I stopped short. The woman staring back at me looked victorious. Glowing skin, perfect hair, eyes still bright from the lights. But there was something else there too. Something underneath the polish. A tightness around the mouth. A guardedness in the eyes. She looked tired of being admired. I sat down slowly, the weight of the night settling into my bones. My throat felt raw, not from singing, but from holding back words that had nowhere to go. I reached for water, took a sip, and felt nothing. No relief. No grounding. That's when it hit me. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a quiet truth tapping on the inside of my ribs. I didn't feel proud. Felt exposed. People thought the stage was where I was most honest. Where I bared my soul. Where nothing was hidden. But sitting there, makeup still on, applause fading, I realized something terrifying. The stage was where I hid best. Music gave me structure. Lyrics gave me permission. Notes gave me somewhere to place feelings without naming them. When I sang, I could be emotional without being specific. Vulnerable without being questioned. Loved without being known. Off stage, none of that worked. A knock came at the door. Whitney. You good in there? Yeah, I answered quickly. Too quickly. Just need a minute. The knock faded away. I stood up and began removing jewelry, one piece at a time, each soft clink sounding louder than it should have. As the weight left my body, the room felt emptier. Like the performance had taken something with it. I thought about the faces in the front row. The woman clutching her chest. The man with his eyes closed, mouthing every word. They believed my voice was giving them something they couldn't give themselves. And I let them believe it. Because as long as they needed me, I didn't have to ask what I needed. That realization scared me more than any bad headline ever had. I sat back down and pressed my palms against my thighs, grounding myself. "Who are you?" I whispered to the empty room. "When nobody's listening." The question echoed without an answer. My phone buzzed on the counter. Messages. Missed calls. Congratulations stacking up like trophies. I turned the screen face down without reading them. For the first time in a long time, I didn't want to be celebrated. I wanted to be honest. But honesty felt dangerous. It meant admitting that the applause didn't fix everything. That singing wasn't healing what I avoided. That maybe my most real moment wasn't happening on stage at all. It was happening here. Alone, unguarded, uncomfortable. I stood up again, this time not to leave, but to lock the door. Because something told me that whatever I was about to face in this quiet room couldn't be shared yet. And once I allowed myself to sit with that truth, I knew this night wasn't ending with the show. It was just beginning. I stayed in that dressing room long after the hallway outside emptied. The laughter faded first. Then the footsteps. Then the distant clang of equipment being packed away. One by one, the sounds of the night peeled themselves off the walls until all that remained was the low hum of the air conditioner and my own breathing. I had locked the door, but it wasn't to keep anyone out. It was to keep myself in. I sat on the couch with my shoes off, feet tucked beneath me, robe pulled tight around my body like armor. Without the costume, without the lights, I felt smaller somehow. Not weaker, just more real. Like I had finally stepped out of a shape the world had pressed me into. I picked up my phone again, staring at the screen without unlocking it. Messages from people who loved me. From people who needed me. From people who expected something from me. I knew what they all said without reading them. "You were amazing. You sounded perfect. You did it again. Again." That word landed heavier than it ever had before. I set the phone down and leaned my head back, closing my eyes. When the darkness settled in, I expected fear, panic, regret. Instead, what came was memory. Not the grand kind. Not awards or stages or headlines. Small moments. Me sitting on the edge of a bed years ago, staring at the floor, wishing someone would ask how I was without asking for anything in return. Me laughing too loud at a joke that wasn't funny because silence felt dangerous. Me choosing music over conversation because singing felt safer than explaining. I realized something then that made my chest tighten. I had been using my voice to avoid my own. Soft knock came at the door. I didn't respond. Whoever it was waited a moment, then knocked again. "Whitney," my assistant said gently. "They're heading to the hotel soon. Just checking on you." "I'm okay," I said. This time the words felt thinner. "Do you want company?" The question hung there, fragile. I almost said yes out of reflex. Almost let someone in so I wouldn't have to sit with myself any longer. But something inside me resisted. Not because I didn't want people, but because I needed to hear my own thoughts before they were drowned out again. "Not yet," I said. "I'll come out in a bit." "Okay," she replied softly. "Take your time." Her footsteps faded, and I felt a surprising swell of gratitude. Not for the space, but for the permission. I stood and walked to the mirror again, studying my reflection more carefully this time. Without the performance glow, I looked tired, honest, human. "I don't know who you are without the applause," I said quietly to myself. The woman in the mirror didn't answer. But she didn't look away either. I thought about how often I had been told to protect my image. To guard my words. To never give the world too much truth at once. I understood why. Truth has a way of changing things. And not everyone benefits from change. But I was starting to understand something else too. I couldn't keep asking music to do the work of healing. Healing required stillness. It required discomfort. It required admitting that some wounds didn't belong in a song, They belonged in a conversation, or a boundary, or a choice I had been afraid to make. I sat back down and hugged a pillow to my chest, the way I used to as a girl when the world felt too loud. The simplicity of the gesture surprised me. No image, no performance, just instinct. That's when the thought came, uninvited but undeniable. What if the most honest version of me was the one no one ever applauded? The idea scared me more than failure ever had. Because if that were true, then I had been running in the wrong direction for years. I glanced toward the door again. I knew if I opened it, the night would resume its familiar rhythm. Smiles, logistics, movement. I could step back into the role effortlessly. Always could. But something about this quiet felt sacred. Like a confession not yet spoken. I wasn't ready to change everything. I wasn't ready to say anything out loud. But I was ready to admit one thing to myself. The stage wasn't where my truth lived anymore. And once I acknowledged that, I knew the next chapters of my life would have to be written somewhere far quieter. Somewhere without applause to tell me who I was supposed to be. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left the venue, even after the hotel room door closed behind me, the quiet followed like a shadow that refused to lift. The city outside my window hummed with late-night traffic and distant sirens, but inside everything felt suspended, like I was waiting for something unnamed to arrive. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my robe, lights off, only the glow of the skyline cutting through the glass. My suitcase lay open on the floor, half packed by someone else earlier in the day. Clothes folded with care. Shoes lined up neatly. A life organized for movement. I hadn't asked for any of it. I picked up the room service menu, then set it back down untouched. Hunger felt irrelevant. My body was tired, but my mind was wide awake, replaying moments I had buried for years. I kept hearing my own question from the dressing room. Who are you when nobody's listening? The answer didn't come easily. Instead, another memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in a long time. A rehearsal years ago, early in my career, when a producer had stopped the music mid-song. "Don't talk between takes," he'd said, not unkindly. "Save it for the singing. That's what people want from you." I had laughed then, shrugged it off, felt practical, efficient. I didn't realize I had taken it as a rule for my life. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the spell. I flinched before picking it up. A message from my mother. Simple. Direct. "You sounded beautiful tonight. Call me when you can." Beautiful. The word felt heavy now, like a compliment that had lost its comfort. Type back slowly. "I will. Tomorrow." I wasn't ready to speak yet. Not even to her. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, tracing faint cracks in the plaster, following them like roads on a map. Somewhere between those lines I felt a shift, subtle but undeniable. A realization settling in my chest, not with panic, but with gravity. I had been measuring my worth by reactions. Applause, praise, numbers, sold-out rooms. Silence had always felt like failure. But tonight, silence felt like truth waiting patiently. Near dawn, exhaustion finally pulled me under for a shallow sleep. When I woke, pale light filtered through the curtains, soft and indifferent. Morning didn't care what kind of night I'd had. Simply arrived. I showered slowly, letting the water run longer than necessary, grounding myself in sensation. Steam filled the room, blurring the mirror, and for once I didn't rush to wipe it clean. I liked not seeing myself clearly. Felt honest. Downstairs, the hotel lobby buzzed quietly. Guests checking out, staff moving with practiced ease. I slipped through unnoticed, sunglasses on, head down. For the first time in years, anonymity didn't feel like a loss. Felt like relief. I walked outside alone. No security. No entourage. Just me and the city, early and unpolished. I sat on a bench a few blocks away, listening to pigeons scatter and a street vendor setting up his cart. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. And that's when something unexpected happened. A woman passed by, then stopped. She turned, studied my face for a second, and smiled softly. "You sound different live," she said. In a good way. I thanked her, surprised by the calm in my voice. She didn't ask for a photo. Didn't gush. She just nodded and kept walking. The interaction lingered with me longer than any standing ovation ever had. Because she hadn't needed anything from me. Back in my room, I finally opened my suitcase and pulled out a notebook I carried everywhere but rarely used. The pages were mostly blank. I sat by the window and wrote the date at the top, my hand hesitating slightly. Then I wrote one sentence. I don't know who I am without performing, but I want to find out. Seeing the words on paper made my throat tighten. Felt dangerous. Liberating. Real. A knock came at the door. I didn't jump this time. I stood slowly, notebook still in hand, heart steady but alert. Whoever it was would pull me back into motion, into decisions, into expectations. I placed the notebook face down on the desk and walked toward the door. As my hand reached for the handle, one thought cut through everything else, sharp and clear. If I opened that door, nothing would ever be quite the same again. And for the first time I wasn't sure if that scared me, or if it was exactly what I'd been waiting for. When I opened the door, it wasn't chaos waiting for me. It was my manager. He stood there with his jacket already on, phone in hand, eyes alert in that way that meant the world had already started spinning again without me. Schedules. Damage control. Next steps. He smiled when he saw me, the practiced kind, relief mixed with assessment. Morning, he said. You ready? The question felt heavier than it should have. Ready for what? I asked, stepping aside to let him in. He glanced around the room, noting the untouched bed, the half-packed suitcase, the quiet. We've got a flight in 3 hours. Interviews lining up. Everyone's talking about last night. Course they were. I sat down by the window, the notebook still on the desk behind me, unseen but present. Talking about what? I asked even though I knew the answer. About the pause, he said carefully. The way you ended the show. People are calling it raw. Unexpected. Some are calling it concerning. There it was. The unspoken fear. Not about me, about perception. I didn't do anything wrong, I said quietly. I know, he replied quickly. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying we need to shape the narrative before it shapes you. Narrative. Shape. Control. Words I had lived inside for years without questioning. He sat across from me, leaning forward. If we get ahead of this, we can turn it into strength. A moment of vulnerability. People love that, as long as it's framed right. I looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't manipulative. He was doing his job the way he always had, protecting the machine we had built together. But something in me resisted. What if I don't want to frame it? Yes. He blinked, surprised. Whitney. What if I don't want to explain it away or package it into something inspiring before I understand it myself? Silence stretched between us. He exhaled slowly. That's risky. So is pretending I'm fine when I'm not. The words landed heavier than I expected. Saying them out loud made them real in a way singing never had. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. You know how this works. If you go quiet, people assume the worst. Maybe, I said. Or maybe they learn to wait. He studied me, uncertainty flickering across his face. This isn't like you. He nodded. That's kind of the point. Another pause. Longer this time. Finally he spoke. What do you want to do? The question startled me. I hadn't been asked that in a long time. I want time, I said slowly. No interviews. No statements. Just space. That's going to upset people. I know. It could cost you. I know, I repeated. But what I didn't say was this. It was already costing me not to ask. He stood up, pacing once, then stopped. Give me 48 hours, he said. That's all I can buy you. He nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. After he left, the room felt different. Charged. Like a decision had been made, even if nothing was announced. I picked up the notebook again, flipping back to the sentence I'd written earlier. Stared up at me like a challenge. Downstairs, the city was fully awake now. People moving with purpose. Lives unfolding without soundtrack or spotlight. I wondered how many of them had moments like mine. Moments when the noise dropped away and the truth finally had room to breathe. That afternoon I cancelled the flight. Not dramatically. Not defiantly. Just quietly. I stayed. And in staying, I felt the weight of years pressing against me. Contracts, expectations, versions of myself that had been useful but incomplete. I didn't know where this choice would lead. I only knew that going back to autopilot felt impossible now. As evening settled in, I sat by the window again, notebook open, pen hovering. I wrote another sentence. I am allowed to exist without performing. My hand trembled as I set the pen down. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, indifferent to my fear, unconcerned with my fame. And for the first time in a long time, that indifference felt like freedom. But even as relief washed over me, a new tension rose beneath it. Because once you stop performing for the world, you have to face the question that follows. Who are you willing to disappoint, them or yourself? And I knew the answer to that question would change everything. The phone didn't ring the next morning. That, more than anything, unsettled me. No frantic calls. No urgent messages marked ASAP. No voices reminding me of obligations I hadn't yet failed. Just silence, thick, unfamiliar, almost suspicious. I woke before sunrise, the city still dim and hushed, and for a moment I forgot who I was supposed to be. There was no stage waiting. No crowd to impress. No note to hit perfectly. Just breath. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot, wrapped in a robe that still smelled faintly of hotel detergent. I made coffee the way normal people did. Slowly, without assistance, without rushing. The ordinary nature of it felt radical. I sat at the table and stared at the steam rising from the mug, thinking about how many mornings I'd started with a voice warm-up instead of a thought. By mid-morning, the world remembered me. The first message came from my mother. Short. Careful. Are you okay? I stared at it for a long time before replying. I don't know yet, I typed. But I'm trying to be. 3 dots appeared almost instantly, then disappeared. No response came after that. Next came friends. Industry friends, mostly. People who understood silence as strategy, not need. Their messages were filled with encouragement that felt rehearsed. So brave. Such a powerful moment. This could be huge for you. Huge. Everything always had to be huge. I put the phone face down and went back to the notebook. I flipped through pages filled with thoughts I'd never intended to show anyone. Fears scribbled between tour dates, questions buried under gratitude lists. Proof that this unraveling hadn't come out of nowhere. It had been building quietly, patiently, while I kept singing louder to drown it out. Around noon there was a knock at the door. This time it wasn't my manager. It was someone I hadn't seen in years. An old vocal coach, someone from before the fame calcified everything. She stood there holding a small paper bag, eyes warm, posture relaxed. I was nearby, she said. Thought you might want company. Or soup. I laughed despite myself and let her in. We sat on the couch, eating quietly at first. No pressure. No agenda. She didn't ask about the show, or the pause, or the headlines. Eventually she spoke. You know, she said, your voice has always been the strongest when you weren't trying to prove anything. I looked at her. What do you mean? She shrugged. When you sing to survive, it's impressive. When you sing to be loved, it's extraordinary. But when you sing because you exist, that's when people feel it in their bones. Her words settled deep, uncomfortable and familiar. I don't know how to do that anymore, I admitted. She nodded. That's okay. You can relearn. Relearn. As if I hadn't been taught instead to polish, to protect, to perfect. After she left, the afternoon stretched long and quiet. I resisted the urge to fill it. No television. No music. Just space. And in that space, memories crept in. Not the glamorous ones, the private ones. The first time applause scared me. The first time I realized people clapped louder when I hid the cracks. The first time I chose strength over honesty because it felt safer. By evening my phone buzzed again. This time it was my manager. "We need to talk." Pressure's building. I stared at the message, heart pounding. I didn't answer immediately. Instead I went to the mirror. I studied my reflection. Not as a brand, not as an icon, but as a woman who looked tired of being misunderstood by herself. The eyes staring back at me were still bright, still capable, but guarded. "How did we get here?" I whispered. The answer wasn't simple. It wasn't one mistake or one relationship or one night. It was 1,000 small compromises made in the name of survival. Finally typed back. "I'm still here. I'm just not ready to perform an explanation." The reply came seconds later. "That may not be an option much longer." Closed my eyes. Fear crept in, sharp and familiar. The fear of losing relevance, of disappointing everyone who depended on me, of being replaced. But beneath it was something new. Resolve. If I went back now, it wouldn't be because I was ready. It would be because I was afraid. And for the first time, fear didn't feel like enough of a reason. That night I went to bed without answers. But I slept deeply. And in my dreams, I wasn't on a stage. I was somewhere quiet, singing softly. Not to be heard, but to remind myself that my voice still belonged to me. And when I woke up, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because stepping away from the world was easy. Stepping back into it on my own terms would be the real test. The room was quiet when I finally understood what had changed. Not peaceful, just honest. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and unannounced, touching the edges of the room without asking permission. I lay there longer than usual, listening to my own breathing, noticing how steady it felt. For years, mornings had meant schedules, demands, expectations already waiting at the door. This one waited for nothing. And for the first time, neither did I. The decision didn't arrive like thunder. There was no dramatic declaration, no cinematic moment of clarity. It came slowly, the way truth usually does, settling into place after everything false has grown too heavy to hold. I wasn't broken. I was tired of pretending I wasn't human. I sat up and reached for the notebook again. This time I didn't flip through old pages. I opened to a clean one. The blankness didn't scare me anymore. I wrote a single sentence. "I don't owe the world a performance to deserve love." The words stared back at me, simple and dangerous. That day I agreed to the meeting. Not on their terms, on mine. We gathered in a small room, no cameras, no entourage. Just me, my manager, and two people whose lives had been built around turning moments into markets. They looked relieved to see me, upright, composed, familiar. "People are worried," one of them said carefully. "They don't understand what's happening." He nodded. "I do." They exchanged glances. "We need reassurance," my manager said. "Something public. Something strong." I leaned forward. "What you want is control. What I need is truth." Silence stretched between us, uncomfortable and revealing. "I will sing again," I continued. "But not right now. And not to prove anything. When I do, it will be because I choose to. Not because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't." One of them sighed. "That's risky." "So is pretending I'm invincible," I replied. For once, I didn't soften my words. I didn't apologize for needing space. I didn't offer a compromise wrapped in charm. Understood. This is the most honest I've ever been. If that costs me something, then maybe that cost is overdue. I left before anyone could argue me back into a role. Outside, the city hummed as it always had. Cars moved. People hurried. The world hadn't paused for my crisis, and strangely that comforted me. Life didn't revolve around my voice. And that was okay. Weeks passed. There were headlines, of course. Speculation bloomed where silence lived. Some called it strength. Others called it weakness. Few called it a breakdown. I didn't correct them. I filled my days differently. Long walks, conversations without agendas, singing quietly in rooms where no one recorded a thing. I rediscovered how my voice sounded when it wasn't chasing perfection. Rougher, softer, truer. One afternoon, alone at the piano, something unexpected happened. I stopped halfway through a song. Not because I missed a note. 'Cause I felt it. Every word landed somewhere real. Not performed. Not projected. Lived. Tears came without drama. Let them. In that moment, I realized the offstage truth I'd been avoiding all along. My voice had never been the problem. The silence around my needs was. I'd spent years using sound to fill emotional gaps no one wanted to acknowledge, including me. When I finally returned to the stage months later, it wasn't announced as a comeback. There were no fireworks. No grand narrative of triumph. Just a woman stepping into the light. I looked out at the crowd. Familiar faces, unfamiliar expectations, and something inside me stayed grounded. I wasn't there to save anyone. I wasn't there to prove resilience. I was there to share, not sacrifice. I spoke before I sang. Tonight, I said, voice steady, I'm not here as an image. I'm here as myself. And that's all I can offer. The applause was softer than usual. But it was real. When I sang, it wasn't perfect. It was honest. And in that honesty, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not power, not admiration, not control. Freedom. My most honest moment didn't happen on that stage. It happened long before. Off stage, in silence, when I finally chose to stop performing my strength and start living my truth. And that decision changed everything. Because the world didn't need a flawless voice. Needed a human one. And so did I.